there's a lot of different groups in Asia that are involved with this, and I go through that in my latest article on the website. So Fulford's background is that he started out mainstream. He was a prominent writer. He was literally the main guy that was Forbes' contact between like Asian countries and the Western world, because he's bilingual. He can speak Japanese fluently and English.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not very common. And if you actually are Caucasian over there in Japan and you speak Japanese, that gives you enormous credibility. And there's very few people who can do that. So that's part of why he's so highly respected. And in fact, you see him on his website, benjaminfulford.typepad.com. He routinely blogs in hiragana, which is the Japanese language, in writing, hiragana and kanji. So there's no question that he's bilingual, and there's no question that he's doing conferences in Japan, releasing videos that are all in Japanese. And I am completely convinced that he's in touch with real insiders who are giving him real information. Now, a lot of times there's disinformation. He's gotten many things that he's been told that are wrong. But he's also been very edgy about the extraterrestrial thing. I understand it. I mean, it seems like you're completely cutting the tethers to your credibility when you start going into ETs. And so he's very reticent to do it. But hopefully this weekend I'm going to be releasing audio of an interview where I tried to get him to go into some information, some detail, because he's now saying that the Chinese were contacted by a group of ETs in the 1940s that had been horribly mistreated by the U.S. Now, we never get straight confirmation, and I asked him this, were these the same people who were affected by the Roswell crash and by the fact that ETs were held hostage? He said, I don't know, I wasn't told that.
Mm-hmm.
But it strongly sounds like that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so, naturally, if you can trace the thought through in your mind and say, okay, people in the Roswell crash, many insiders say that one of the things that the Roswell beings had in their hands was called the cube, and it's an ability to look through time that this machine generates for you. They also call it the yellow disc because there's this little thing that looks like a yellow disc that sits on top of it when it pops open. But you basically think about what point in time you want to look at, and then it shows it to you in a holographic form. So if these Roswell beings had the cube, which I totally believe they did based on multiple insider testimonies, then they can see the future, and they could see that even if China didn't seem like much more than a very large, almost medieval country for that time, that they would become a formidable world power in the future. So I believe this is what's going on, that the people that were in the Roswell crash, who were effectively good people, you got to remember now, if you actually go into what the real insiders say, the Roswell beings are not grays. That's a very common misunderstanding. You go back to the original data, people who actually saw them, they looked like children, like 10-year-old children with large heads and unusually large eyes. But the eyes are like our eyes, just much bigger. They're not black.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very common problem that people have when they look at this. Because, again, most of the people out there are human. And even the ones who do have black eyes, we now know that that's not the way they really look biologically. That's just a form of sunglasses that pop over the eye like a contact lens. And it has all this computerized stuff inside of it that allows them to be able to use technology that's coming from their ship or stuff that they have in their hands, and they can get a lot of advanced information that they wouldn't be able to see otherwise. It's like a heads-up display. It's like a cockpit, but it's right inside their eyes. So there's all kinds of things they can do with those visors that make it a valuable technology to have. Plus, it shields their eyes from the solar radiation of their native planet, which is usually like much too bright for their naked eye to see.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, these beings, what we're now learning from Fulford, and I feel this is legendary information, it's breakthrough stuff in ufology that we're now getting all these connections being made. The Roswell people, the people that were the families of the ones that got captured, went to China and brokered a deal with them. And they have literally been working since the 1940s, ever since, in this plan to defeat the Illuminati, which has only started to actually go into the working phase since September of this year. They've waited this long to really finally make their move, and I believe the reason why is that there is no value in making their move until the adversary was weak enough that whatever they're going to do would actually be effective. So that's a very important point. There's been a lot of extraterrestrial assistance to the Chinese behind the scenes and to their allies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, or BRIC. And this assistance has, to a large degree, involved an economic battle, which is why you had the 2008 economic collapse. If you actually look at the presidential election, don't fool yourself for 1 minute into thinking that anybody in the Rockefeller faction wanted there to be a total economic collapse right before the presidential election. That didn't help anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted John McCain to be president. They did not want Obama to be president. Hillary was the European faction's chosen candidate, and John McCain was the Rockefeller faction's chosen candidate. And the reason why they wanted McCain is that they felt that he was going to die pretty soon, or else they might have even been able to help it along. And nobody would have accepted Sarah Palin as president. In fact, McCain went behind their backs to pick her as his running mate. They did not approve of that. He made this crazy maverick move and did it behind their backs. They wanted him. There was one faction that wanted him to pick Lieberman because the Jewish faction is very strong. There was another faction that wanted him to pick Romney because, believe it or not, Mormonism is very, very powerful in the insider black ops community. And Romney's a Mormon, just like Glenn Beck is a Mormon. And you don't ever hear him talking about Mormonism, but he totally is.
Never.
Well, they've moved most of these facilities away from places like Area 51 and places like the Denver base under the airport. They've moved it all to Utah. And that whole area, it was originally a joke, but now they actually call it Mormania. It consists of like Washington, Oregon, Utah, Idaho. You know, there's this group of states in the Northwest that they want to really protect and have that be sort of like the safe haven in the event that things really go south. But they did not in any way want there to be an economic collapse before the election because literally you have John McCain on national television saying the fundamentals of the economy are sound.
Yeah.
And then the next week, bam. And a lot of the funds that went belly up were these hedge funds that are really one of the best Ponzi schemes in town, where you bet against these other stocks, these other companies, knowing when they're going to go down, and then when they go down, because of the way these derivatives are written, they have to basically hand you all their wealth on the way down. It's really corrupt and crazy. So Fulford has been saying that the Chinese engineered this collapse for 2008, and as a result of engineering this collapse, there was a lot of contracts that they had with the Chinese that were leveraged into gold. In other words, when these hedge funds actually went belly up, which again, nobody expected was going to happen, their only recourse is to pay back the debt that they now have incurred in solid gold. But here's the problem. They have spent the gold, they have allocated the gold elsewhere. The gold didn't exist, and they actually had the balls to try to pass off on China after this 2008 major meltdown, to pass off electroplated tungsten. And I've told you this before, Tom. It was
I remember.
Tungsten weighs almost exactly the same as gold. All you got to do is drill out a little bit at the bottom of the bar and pour a little lead in there, and then you can make it perfect. Then you electroplate some gold on the outside. The value of any one bar, in terms of the gold you're putting in, is maybe not more than $1,000, $2,000 at the most. But now it's become like worth $30,000 in terms of its apparent gold value, if not a lot more than that. I'm not really sure what the value of any one 400-ounce bar of gold is, but clearly, if gold is $1,000 an ounce and you have 400 ounces, you got $400,000. So these are very expensive. So Anyway, they passed off an enormous amount of this fake gold all around the world. That came out in 2009. And I think it was also by the end of 2008 that story might have been breaking too. But I believe it was in 2009 that we really became aware of it. Or no, it was 2008. No, it was 2009. I'm sorry. It's very confusing to keep all these facts straight. It was 2009 that the story broke, and we found out that China had been passed fake gold, and they are pissed. And what they're saying is, you guys have to pay up, and we're not going to accept no for an answer. Well, the insiders in the Rockefeller faction have been failing to pay and failing to pay and failing to pay, but nobody has really been able to fully stop them so far. And last year, around this time last year, is when we saw things like the Norway spiral. The Norway spiral, in my opinion, and I've given a lot of credence to this in what I wrote on my website, the Norway spiral was a deliberate attempt to break the seal around disclosure. We also see these same Roswell beings, the ones that are allied with China, they have made many blatant attempts to break the UFO cover-up by flying over Chinese airspace. So if you look in the last year, you look over 2010, you'll find multiple stories of UFOs over the Chinese airport, shutting down the whole airport, freaking everybody out. Well, why don't they do that anywhere else? China is not part of this group. China does not have weapons that would shoot them down out of the sky. That's why they've been doing it over China. But they still haven't gotten as many results as they were hoping they would get in terms of actually shutting this whole thing down by doing this. So cut to, they come up with a plan which is really quite intense. And I only recently have been able to describe the plan in detail because the whole entire thing leaked on the internet on one of the top UFO discussion forums online. And there's all the information. When I went in there and read this, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what everybody's been telling me, and it's already been printed. Therefore, I don't have any security risk in saying it. So what happened is this, and this is really, I was so blown away when I heard this story, because the Chinese delivered by courier to the actual palaces or White House or whatever of every country in the world. They delivered these packages as of July, and they did it like simultaneously. It must have been very coordinated. Once the packages were actually dropped off, people were told, if you open this before October 13th, it's going to blow up 6-mile radius around the package. There will be nothing left, not anything. It's just going to be a big giant crater. And I'm assuming that they were told that if you move the device, it's going to go off as well. So like they couldn't quarantine it, they couldn't make it go away, but they said, don't worry, if you open it on the 13th, all we're saying is open the box. There's nothing in the box that's going to hurt you, but you have to wait till the October 13th before you can open it. And also they were told if you don't open the box within a certain finite time, that it will also go off. So anyway, what happened is a lot of the world leaders waited until the 14th. They were really freaked out by this, but they did open it up. And inside, what they found was blueprints for free energy devices and a working prototype of a device that you can drop into an ordinary automobile as a little battery, and you can get 1,000 miles to the gallon on water and literally run your car on water. Now, why would they do this? The Chinese, obviously, part of why they want to do this is that they're already like the major industrial power in the world now. And if free energy was out and available, they no longer have to fight over oil and resources, and they can develop even more. Now, according to Benjamin Fulford, the Chinese do not want to reduce population. They're not trying to kill off everybody. They have introduced population controls in their own country, but they're not trying to do a mass genocide. However, there is an ongoing effort being made now that this stuff is leaking to make it appear that the Chinese are trying to ruin the planet, that they're trying to kill 70% of the population of the Earth, that these ETs that they're in conjunction with are trying to